The Dolphins do have a number of lingering holes on the roster, but courtship is a two-way street. What kind of sales pitch can the Dolphins put together for potential free agents at this stage of the game? We're exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, and the author of Touchdown Miami on Substack. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Free agency. We're still kind of waiting. The Dolphins got their rookie class with the exception of Jonah Savanea under contract at the end of last week. They had rookie minicamp for a couple of days. Players are in at the facility, kind of minicamp and OTAs, starting to build up. So kind of the exciting build before the 6-week dead period before training camp starts and teams really start putting the pedal to the metal. The Dolphins, of course, still have a number of lingering roster transactions to take place, including signing their second-round offensive guard, although he was at and in attendance and was suited up for minicamp, which is a nice development as the team tries to get him onboarded and assimilated into presumably a starting role for the team. But then also Jalen Ramsey and his lingering status kind of leaves that the Dolphins are going to be shoring up some spots along the roster. And there's a couple of different spots you can look at and identify holes that exist. And you'd love to get a veteran in-house. Very easy to point at players and say, well, we should sign that guy and that guy and that guy and that guy. It's a two-way street. Right? Like the appeal has to be on both parties. The Dolphins can look at a player, but if the player looks at the situation that the Dolphins can afford them, I think it makes it a little bit more challenging to assume that the Dolphins will be readily adding new names to that room. And I think that can come in a couple of different ways and places, and I think for the Dolphins in particular, you look at where they've invested some youth. This was presumably a part of the strategy and why they weren't big-time free agent spenders. They certainly had the cap space. They could have restructured the contracts. They could have manipulated the salary cap and created a lot of space to be a lot more assertive. And instead, their focus is, as always, unfortunately the case, is you ride a build until the build declares itself to be maxed out or on the decline. And that's what the Dolphins did. Their build started in 2019. Their first competitive year was in 2020, and they had 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. Not a math guy, but 6-year total build, right? You don't have a lot to show for it, and that has a lot of fans rightfully frustrated. But I would say most life cycles in the NFL without that transitional period are 5 or 6 years. Now, you'll have some teams that have number 12 at quarterback who played in the AFC East and won a whole bunch of Super Bowls, or Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, like those transcendent players. Even in your transitional years, you could still compete to win because of how good that player is to carry the entirety of the roster. But by and large, that's not the world that the majority of the league is playing on a year-by-year basis. Even Philadelphia, right? Like Philadelphia had the Doug Peterson run, and then they had a transitional period where they had a regression year where a bunch of guys got hurt and they won like 5 games, and then they went 9-7, and then they were back to competitive. But there was a transition period that existed there. So how the Dolphins chose to handle this offseason, you could say, if you were a pessimistic fan, that their hand was forced, but I just kind of accept that's part of the reality of any time you build around a nucleus of players. As those players get older and more expensive and young players require new contracts that you're not going to pay everybody. And you try to survive and ride the wave as long as you can. And we went over it last week, but I would rather the team acknowledge that the wave is over and that it's been maxed out, and start the transition before they pour more assets into trying to squeeze blood out of the stone for one more year, right? But because of the circumstances around the team, that leaves a little bit more of a unique, this is where we are at in our build. We're not going to get super competitive contract offer out to Calais Campbell, even though I would have readily paid Calais Campbell or offered Calais Campbell the same dollar amount that the Cardinals did. They chose not to. So it's not necessarily, well, Calais Campbell doesn't believe in Mike McDaniel and bailed on the team. I've seen that asserted. It becomes very elementary from a financial standpoint that the Dolphins didn't put an offer out in front of Calais Campbell that was anywhere near the money that the Cardinals did. And if I'm going to be in my 19th year and still tick in and have a chance to go home to where my career started and they're offering twice the money, I'm going to take that. Right now, you could get into whether or not that was a mistake from the Dolphins, but it kind of speaks to they wanted to allocate young players, and their draft class by age is the youngest draft class in the NFL this year. And their average free agent from an age perspective is very young. They're trying to get more chips and players in place that can be here and hopefully have more durability, right? So all of that adds up to, I think, the circumstances for this season. If you're looking for a mercenary, maybe that's not the right fit for the Dolphins as a football team. But it also cuts the other way, whereas if you, the Dolphins, can't provide a player with a chance to start and they're a late stage player that wants to continue to maximize their career earnings, you might not be the team for them either. So we're going to look at the offensive and defensive appeal next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all of my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It can be very easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. You can stop managing your money and start building wealth. When you start using Monarch, you may have your eyes open by just how much that 2-door delivery service was costing you each and every month. Monarch can help you budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. Offensively, when you look at where the Dolphins' needs still exist, you are looking for, ideally, in my opinion, we'll see if the team agrees with this or not. I think it would be a mistake to not pursue another contingency flex utility offensive lineman type player. But some of the names that exist that are out there, I mean, I'll pull up overthecap.com and look at their free agency tracker as things currently stand. But Brandon Scherff as a free agent offensive guard, still out there, played 98% of the snaps last year, 34 years old. His current, the AAV or average annual average of his previous contract was $10 million per season. It's handsome money. You're not probably going to call Brandon Scherff up at this point and say, hey, Brandon, we just drafted and invested 2 draft picks in Jonas Avanea. We really want you to come sign in Miami and be a depth player for the Dolphins. Right? He's going to say, well, kick rocks. I played 98% of snaps last year. I want to be a starter somewhere. And he's earned that right. And I think that is kind of what compounds Miami's search is when you look at who all is out there. Like Dalton Risner has held out to be a starting caliber player. Will Hernandez from the Cardinals, who had a season-ending injury, started his career with 4 seasons on his rookie contract in New York, and then kind of steadily played his way up with Arizona and kind of found his footing in year 5 and year 6. Never really missed significant amounts of time until 2024, in which he played only 25% of the snaps on the season. But he's not a guy that's got position flex. He's not a great scheme fit. And now you're talking about potentially we don't even have like an opportunity to compete for a starting spot because James Daniels is getting $8 million per season, and the Dolphins invested what they did to go out and draft Jonah. So that's where I think the big blockade exists for Miami for some of the existing free agents that are some of the names you'd probably like to see them be after and pursue. Is I don't think there's a great deal of like mutual benefit for the opportunities. You contrast that to Baltimore signing Joe Noteboom, and Noteboom just signed, I think it was last week. That was one that hurt because I was really hoping to see the Dolphins land a player like a Joe Noteboom. Baltimore's offensive tackles were Ronnie Stanley, Roger Rosengarten, and then literally every other offensive tackle on the roster is either a rookie draft pick or a UDFA. It's 5th round pick Carson Vinson, 3rd round pick Emory Jones. Those were draft choices in 2025. Gerard Christian Lichtenhan is a UDFA out of Oregon State, who was previously at Colorado, signed. Like, their swing tackle spot wide open. And even the guards, it's Ben Cleveland and then a 7th round draft choice in Garrett Dellinger. So Noteboom, who can play guard and can play tackle, and Andrew Voorhees is currently, as a 7th round pick from 2023, penciled to be the left guard. There's a potential to compete, maybe to be a starter. I don't really think the Dolphins have that opportunity for Joe Noteboom. And so now you're really looking for, I think, the right kind of player that's motivated for the right kinds of reasons, who's comfortable with not having a starting role. Because with the investment in Patrick Paul, like it or not, Patrick Paul is going to play. With the investment in Jonah, like it or not, Jonah's going to play. With the investment in Aaron Brewer, who got a 3-year, $21 million a year contract at $7 million per season, the investment in James Daniels, who got 3 for $24, and that was just signed, and then obviously Austin Jackson. Like, there's just the 5 feels like the 5. And you can get into who your swing tackle is. And is it truly Larry Borum? Is it Keon Smith? I'd love another player. But I think the sales pitch becomes a little bit more complicated because you don't have that flex in negotiation to say, hey, yeah, you could come here and we have an open vacancy for a place that we feel is going to be wide open for you to potentially, if you come in and ball out, you could win a starting job in camp. I think the investments that the Dolphins have made in their offensive line, which is ironic, given that one of the biggest complaints is that there hasn't been enough investment in the offensive line. But I think the investments that have been made in the last 15 months at the offensive line kind of dictate the terms of the 5's the 5. Now, durabilities and injury can always change that, and that's why I'm sitting here today on May 12th, and I'm continuing to covet more depth for the offensive line if you can get it. I think the spot that's most open is probably the Y tight end position, given that they didn't really guarantee anything to Pharaoh Brown, and Julian Hill is obviously on a UDFA contract. But there's not names at that position that get you excited. Wide receiver between Nick Westbrook-Ikine and Malik Washington. I mean, you're talking about kind of a fringe player, not the fringe contributing player in the passing game. When you include the receivers and Jonnu, you're talking about the 5th, 6th option in the passing game. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of interest there. And then the team signed Alexander Madison, who will have nothing guaranteed to him, but Ollie Gordon with a Jalen Wright, who they clearly saw a lot in last year, and Devon Achane. I think the rest of the offense, there's not a lot of sales pitch and opportunity. You got to find the right name to get that offensive line player without, in my opinion, probably overpaying for them when the chips are down. And that's where I think maybe the relationship with Daniel Brunskill and from his time in San Francisco maybe makes some sense for the Dolphins. Now, defensively, I think it's a very different story. Very different story for the sales pitch. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked on Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. Defensively, I feel like you could make an argument that outside of off-ball linebacker, like there is snaps and opportunity to be had almost everywhere, right? And the draft choices kind of mitigate the urgency to bring in another name on the defensive line to say, hey, we need a warm body here. Right? I don't feel like you have that level of critical ailment anymore with Zach Sealer and Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips and Benito Jones, and whether it's Zeke Biggers or Matt Dickerson's the 5. Can you upgrade the bottom portion of that group? And do you have any idea what you have in your rookies? No. Yes, you can upgrade the rest of the group. And no, you don't have any idea how the rookies are going to play until they're actually time to go out there and play. But again, based on the investments, you're inclined to think those guys are going to get opportunities in kind of this foundational year and window, which is going to serve as the launch point for the next chapter, 5-6 year chapter of the organization, right? But you do have, hey, maybe we want a tackle end hybrid type player. You have that role, and there's more flexibility with the defensive front based on front structure and matchups and personnel groupings than what you have on the offensive line, where really just kind of your 5's your 5. So I feel like you got a better sales pitch for a role-specific player there. I think you probably have as good of an argument for another pass rusher. I mean, your 4th pass rusher right now is going to be between Quentin Bell, who played like 250 snaps for you last year. And I think Quentin's a great story. I think Quentin proved himself as an NFL player. I think in an ideal world, he's probably your edge 5 or 6. And is more of a special teams type contributor than a guy who's going to play 350 snaps for you, rushing the passer. But you have the injury histories with Chubb and Phillips. And as is, teams have 4 pass rushers on the edge that can go and can take meaningful snaps. So I feel like they'll probably be inclined for the young players to assume a lot of those opportunities, but I think the durability dynamic makes it, again, a little bit more of an attractive destination for, hey, if you're a pass rusher, and if the Dolphins were to reach down in their pockets and find an Emmanuel Agba last year sized contract and offer one at $5-6 million for somebody, would they take it? It depends on what other kind of interest they get. But again, because of the nature of the position and kind of how teams like to covet keeping guys fresh and then the injury dynamics, you could maybe have some play here. Corner is the easiest sell job in the world. If I'm the Dolphins and I'm trying to sell corner to a corner on the free agent market, conversation starts here. This team was missing a lot of their primary pieces last year on the defensive front. Zach Sealer's been a double-digit sack guy the last 2 years. We're getting back a fully healthy Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips to go with Chop Robinson and his nearly 60 pressures last season. We are going to have disruptive players in the defensive front for you to play behind. And we have an opportunity to play and maybe be the marquee guy, depending on what Kader Kohou's leap looks like. What are you getting out of Cam Smith? Jason Marshall's a 5th-round pick. Like, you don't know anything about any of these guys. So when you end up moving Ramsey, it's all bets are off in the cornerback room. who emerges out of that group, it's kind of a battle royale. Somebody has to play. Now, you could go 3 safeties more often than not, and I think there's some situations in which that might make a lot of sense, and I could see the vision behind it. But the sales pitch is super easy. Oh, who were the starting corners last year? Ramsey, he's getting traded. Oh, who's the other starting corner last year? It was Kendall Fuller. Oh, right, we cut him. Haven't replaced him yet. Super easy sales pitch at cornerback. And I think that's the thing that the Dolphins have working in their advantage at that spot is just how apparent it is. Now, they have a lot of youth, but they don't have anybody that, in my opinion, is owed. Like, if Cam Smith was a rookie this year, it would probably be a different conversation. You're like, they just spent a second-round pick on him. But they didn't. He's going into year 3. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. There's been multiple coaching staffs that have not had him earn trust to go out and play and perform and execute. He's getting passed by UDFAs like Storm Duck and Ethan Bonner the last 2 years, right? If you were a rookie, there'd probably be a better argument to be had. And it's an unfortunate miss. Nobody's going to sit here and debate that. And the book's not written on Cam Smith yet, but I ain't holding my breath. But to me, I think it's very different to say, oh, well, you have a second-round draft choice in Jonah. He's going to play right guard for you. Because they just did that. That was this year's vision. Versus Cam Smith was the vision 2 years ago and has not been able to put together really anything of substance thus far. So if I had to put them in order, I think the Dolphins have the most appealing sales pitch for a corner because of just how apparent the need is for a body to take the snaps. Anybody who, whether they're looking for a short-term contract, whether they're looking to cash in and then hit the market and play well, I think they've got the bodies on the defensive front that could allow a corner to play well if they execute the scheme well. Maybe prolong a player's career, maybe be the destination that gets a player a big contract and on a 1-year deal. After a 1-year deal here in Miami in 2025, cornerback, the sales pitch is easy. I think those rotational defensive line spots at this point are middle of the road for the sales pitch because of the rotation, and you could always have more veteran depth and experience and versatility. But that offensive line spot, I don't think they've got a really good sales pitch for. So what's the right price? What's the right relationship? What's the right connection? Can you find one? And if you can't, we're talking about going to camp with an O-lineman number 8 that I don't feel really good about. Probably an O-lineman 7. The projected starting 5 and like Larry Borum as a utility player, like, okay, like that group I can wrap my head around. Eichenberg, ideally, is your O-lineman 9. You're talking about him being, again, another spot too high up on the depth chart for my liking. So let's hope the Dolphins can find that right relationship or connection to tap into to bring somebody in here who can be that depth player that the Dolphins need. That is going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins.